it is an honor to be in Nashville this evening with Brett James. Brett, thank you for welcoming us into your home.
Thank you guys for coming all this way. It's a thrill to have you.
It's great to be here. Congratulations on your Medal of Service Award.
Thank you so much.
Baylor. And it's been a year of awards for you. Congratulations on being inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Thank you. That's very exciting as well.
Tell us, what does that represent in your profession to be inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame?
Well, it's just sort of, it's a body of work, and it comes, it's voted on by your peers, by other songwriters, and that's what really makes it special. You have to be doing it a long time. You don't qualify. It has to be 20 years from your first hit before you're even eligible. So you got to hang around a long time to get one, and it's just you feel really blessed to have gotten to. I feel really blessed to have gotten to do my job as long as I have, and had a lot of fun years and a lot of successes and a lot of failures. It's sort of a lifetime achievement thing. It's great.
And you're going to get to do this in person. They're going to blend the 2020 and 2021 recipients.
They are. I actually get to go to that one next year, so that'll be fun.
Well, congratulations. That's a wonderful achievement. Let's go back in time a little bit to your Baylor story. Tell us what it was like to be at Baylor and how that has shaped who you are today.
Wow, that's a great question. Baylor is just full of so many quality people. That's how I describe it to people that ask. And I'm like, you are just surrounded by such quality people when you're in Waco at Baylor University that I think, all ships rise. And that's the way my experience has been that. I still, I text every day with 5 of my best friends from Baylor. And these are the guys who, they say iron sharpens iron. These are the guys that kind of challenge me and kind of, I think, maybe make me a better person in that way. And, that was my experience at Baylor, is that I was just around such challenging, amazing people that I just wanted to try to keep up.
Mm-hmm. This is a guy that invites those friends over and has celebrations, particularly, and I'm thinking about the national championship game. So
we had a big one right here last night, and we had a blast. Yeah, it was so much fun to watch that game with some friends and some Baylor people, and root on the Bears. So proud of that team. They're just amazing.
Yeah. How about the perspective of being a parent? Because you have a son that is a graduate, a son who's there. What is that like from that perspective, with the intimate understanding of what it was like for you at Baylor?
That's been such a highlight for me, to kind of get to go and relive it all over again through their eyes. I think that's every parent's dream on some levels. I know what an amazing experience I had, but you can't project that on your own kid. You just hope for the best. And my 2 sons that have both, one graduated and one graduates in May, have both had an equally amazing experience as to what I had. And they've made lifelong friends, and, both girls they're probably going to marry, and those kind of things that are what college is all about. And I think they've been, challenged in all the ways you'd want your kids challenged. I don't think they've been challenged, academically, socially, spiritually, all the ways you want your kids to be challenged and molded. I think Baylor's done that for them, just like it did for me.
And one more on the horizon, because there's a junior. And so are you steering him in that direction?
Oh, I have not steered any of them in that direction.
Really?
I mean, they grow up, rooting for the Bears, and but I want them to be their own people. I want them to make their own decisions about school. And, I would love for them to go to Baylor, but I'm not a dad that's going to say, this is the spot, this is where you have to be. I think every kid's different. I have a daughter at Pepperdine, for instance, and she loves it there. But yes, I get, there's a percentage of happiness that I'm that much more happy if they go to Baylor for sure. So I've got one junior in high school, and I hope he ends up being a Bear as well. I think I might owe it to this national championship team if he ends up there, because
a little bit of a nudge.
That's a nudge, yeah, absolutely.
All right. The life of a songwriter. This is a dream for a lot of young people. And it wasn't the natural course for you in your career. You ended up there, but that's not where you started.
No, I failed miserably as a recording artist for about 7 years. That's how I ended up being a songwriter. I first started in medical school. I went to Baylor. I was pre-med, and then I spent 2 years in med school, and for whatever reason, I started writing songs. And just as fate would have it, my spring break on my sophomore year of med school, I knew one intern in the music business in Nashville, and somehow I came to Nashville on my spring break of my sophomore year and got offered a huge record deal my third day in town. Amazing. And was kind of like, okay, I don't know what to do with that. So I finished that year of med school, took my sophomore boards and jumped in my Datsun Maxima and drove to Nashville to try to chase my dream. And like I said, failed miserably for about 7 years, and went back to med school when I was 30, thinking I was just, going to just figure out a way to feed my kids. I had a couple of young babies at the time, so I decided I was going to give up music once. Went back to medical school, and God had other plans. It was when I went back that all my success started happening as a songwriter for whatever reason. And I started back to med school on September 1st, and Faith Hill cut one of my songs on September 4th, and I got 33 more songs recorded in the next 9 months, and
Incredible.
Had 5 top 10 singles on the radio that year. And I was like, okay, God's telling me that I'm going to be a really bad doctor. I think that's what God was protecting future patients from me.
Where'd the medical school idea or notion come from?
Family. So, my father and grandfather were both docs, and both loved it. They really loved what they did, and I saw how much, passion they both had about it. And I still have so much respect for the medical profession, all of them. Not just doctors, but all the nurses and all the people that care for people every day. And for me, it wasn't. I absolutely loved medical school. I loved studying that stuff. I had a great time there. It wasn't like I was trying to get out. It just seemed like maybe I had a more natural affinity for what I do now. And, you kind of just go where God leads in life. Sometimes you don't get to make those decisions. And for whatever reason, this is where I ended up.
Yeah. Well, it was a good path that you chose.
It's been great. Yeah.
So the life of a songwriter, give us the behind the scenes of the day to day. It's like, because you're writing songs, you've been recording, you're directing, you're doing lots of different things now.
Sure. The life of a songwriter, day-to-day songwriter is Nashville's sort of the last bastion almost in the world of a creative community of songwriters. New York used to have an amazing group in LA and London, but a lot of those, they've spread out, or they've just come here, quite honestly. A lot of great writers have moved here since I've been here almost 30 years ago. That's when I moved. And, what I would say, people think songwriters sort of just, float around and, we just smoke a lot of weed and wait for inspiration to strike. But that's not really the way it works. Professional songwriters treat it like a job, like any other job. And I usually say there's a lot of inspiration and then there's just a lot of work. We're also trying to create a product for a marketplace, just like almost any other job. And so, my job is to not write what I feel or what I'm thinking, or not write what I love necessarily every day. Those are the best days. But my job is to try to create something that this art, what an artist wants to say. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes a bit of it's a little bit like role playing or acting for me. And then you just write a lot of songs because, we were talking earlier, I think I've had a little over 500 of my songs recorded by different recording artists, but I've written over 4,000. So there's a lot of wasted bad songs and long days and you think you've got the greatest song ever and then nobody cares, So you have to learn to fail a lot and just keep trying. There
must be days, though, when you wake up and the creative juices you feel like are flowing a little bit more than other days?
Oh, absolutely. There's always an art to creativity, in my opinion, and I've been doing it long enough to know that there's, sort of like you kind of getting in your groove. It's like maybe being an athlete. I could, like the guys like watching Jared Butler or those guys when they're just in the zone and they're feeling it. I would say that's kind of when you're up here as a songwriter and stuff's just flying out and you're working and your creativity's really flowing and everything's going great. And then inevitably there's like that the other side of the arc where you're like, oh, I can't come up with anything. And usually that's time for me, at least, just to take a little break, just to walk away for a minute and recharge my batteries. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of creative people, do that. I don't think anybody stays at their creative peak all the time, or their athletic peak for that matter.
Have you found an environment that works the best for you? In other words, I like being alone or with people around me, or what's
Sure.
best for you?
Well, in Nashville, in our songwriting kind of community here. When I moved to town, like everybody else, I'd never written with another person. You kind of just sit in your bedroom and you write songs and you make stuff up. And I still love to do that. I actually released my own 2 EPs last year of songs that I wrote by myself. You know, just kind of to get that creatively out of me and to go through that process. But typically in Nashville, we collaborate almost all the time. And when you're working with peers, it's sort of like, I've said all ships rise. When you're working with some of the most talented writers in the world, why wouldn't you want to show up in the room with them or in the studio with them? So, what happens is most days, you ask a typical day for a songwriter, I can look at my calendar and tell you who I'm writing with in October, because it's already booked, and so I've got people that schedule these things for me, and they put me together with writers that I love or artists that I love, or maybe artists that I don't know I love yet. And so my job is to show up that day and get to know them. Like I did yesterday, I worked with a new artist yesterday and his producer. And so there were 3 of us in the room, and that's sort of a more typical day now than sitting at home by yourself trying to write something.
Well, you've worked with the most incredible performers on the planet. And so are you spending much time with them together when you're doing this work?
It depends. Some artists like to really be there when you write. For instance, when I write with Carrie Underwood or Kenny Chesney, they're there, in the room. And then other artists are not as, some artists you just write for, and they hear the song and they love the song and they go ahead and then that's how you get them to record the song. So it happens all different ways. Some you have relationships with that are writing relationships, and others you don't. They might be your friends, but I don't necessarily write with everyone that I'm lucky enough to have record my songs.
What do you tell young people that come to you and say, I want to be in this business? Because that only a few end up making it at the level that you've made it. And of course, you don't want to discourage them, but it's...
No, 2 things you typically tell them. If you want to do what I do, move to Nashville, because this is the place that you sort of have to be to get your foot in the door. Maybe that's changing with COVID. We've actually learned to write on Zoom. I didn't think that was going to be a thing, but so maybe that is not as important as it used to be. And then just really, study the craft, just like anything else. There are, for instance, in our town, we have 2 universities that have songwriting majors. You can do that if you want to. Or you can just study your favorite songwriters and really get into the process. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of willingness to write a lot of bad songs, And so I think that's just the desire. And if you can mix the desire and the talent together, then ultimately you'll get there. And don't be discouraged, because it is a challenging business to get your foot in the door.
What is the piece of work that you're the most proud of? That's probably a difficult question because you've written so many songs, but there must be something out there that...
there really isn't one. What's funny about, I mentioned that there's 4,000 songs, probably 50 of my favorite 100 you've never heard, because no one ever recorded them. Because it doesn't mean every song that you think is great is going to find the artist and find its way into the world. And so a lot of my favorite songs that mean something to me have never been put out on the radio at all. So, I think it's more about just loving the everyday, being in the trenches and getting to be creative and working with my friends. I always say that my 2 favorite things about being a songwriter over this period of years are the relationships, because when you are writing songs with other people, it's a little different than just, sharing a desk job. We get to know each other pretty well because we're writing kind of on this deep level sometimes. And so the friendships that I've made over the years it's my favorite part. And then when you do stumble on a song that actually finds the right artist and finds its way into the world through radio or whatever, and it's a song that actually means something to people, and they come up to you and say, wow, I needed to hear that at a certain time in my life. Those are the ones that really, make me love my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in for a treat here in a minute because Brett is going to perform for us, and so you stay tuned. But we were talking a little bit earlier about the transition in country music from traditional country music to more of a modern country music. And you've had to adapt because you've been doing this long enough. What's that like?
Well, I think it's just like any job. You do have to adapt, and especially, whether it's any creative profession, especially, nothing's going to stay the same. And so, what now I'm the old guy in every room I work in, right? I mean, that's you know, and that's what's fun for me too. You know, a lot of times I'm working with, you know, peers that are my kids' age, you know, and in the room, they're my peers. They're the people I'm co-writing with. And what you learn as you get older, what I'm trying to learn is that their reference points, their musical references are not the same as mine. Mm-hmm. And actually they're more fresh than mine because they're 18 years old and they're on top of it. And so what I am learning, and what I think I'm learning as I get older is to listen more, you know, to listen to youth, you know, and to listen to the young people that I get to work with. Because that's how hopefully I can stay relevant, you know, if I can use their youth and their kind of what they've got going on in their universe and just kind of help that along with some experience. I think that becomes my goal sometimes in those rooms.